what I want to do now is do a little extra.
Ooh, what's extra? Yes.
So hi guys. We're gonna take this time to do a kind of like some extra footage, get a little bit more insight about Lisette and her family. But one thing that I'm hearing is a common thread for you is your faith. And me knowing you, I know you love Jesus. I love Jesus, but you don't play with Jesus. Jesus is your man. He is there for you. So just want to hear how faith has played a role for you, and you've talked a little bit about it, and more so in your first video about growing up in the church. But really, now that you're an adult and you're kind of doing things on your own in a sense, how has faith continuously play a role in just your life, everyday life, and just continue to have that faith?
Such a good question. And I am wearing my Transformation Nation shirt.
Okay.
So if you know what that is, if you're watching, shout out to those that are part of Transformation Nation. And I'll get into how this kind of plays into my faith as an adult. To your point, I think growing up, obviously, went to church because my mom wanted to go to church. And that's a whole other thing. My dad was staunch. No, not my kids.
Really? Wow.
He grew up Catholic.
Okay.
Which, if you know, all Mexicans are Catholic, apparently.
I didn't want to put y'all in a box. I don't want to put people in a box, but yes, I have heard that. Yeah.
But we're not all Catholic. And I love to just touch a little bit on more about that sort of beginning, where it all kind of started, because that's something that as an adult I've come to sort of know more about. I had a conversation with my mom about how she came to know Jesus as her father and things like that. And I always thought it was my grandmother who instilled that in her, but it actually was my great grandparents. And I didn't know that, and I didn't realize that at a time where a lot of people were Catholic and things like that. And, my great grandparents really fell into that more Pentecostal kind of church. I think it's Pentecostal. I don't always remember all the details, but it was definitely more of that Christian sort of Protestant kind of faith. And, and that's how my mom, came to know Jesus and that Protestant faith. And understanding, and she told me a story about how when my great grandmother was passing away, she actually ended up going back to Mexico and being able to see her before that happened. And my great grandmother told her, like, make sure you find Jesus, and make sure you bring up your kids. At the time I wasn't born yet, so I wasn't in existence yet, but my great grandmother said, you have, two beautiful children that, don't let them get lost. Mm-hmm. And that impacted my mother, that she came back and she found the church that I grew up in, and I never knew that story. So I just felt I wanted to share that, because I think that as an adult has even shaped and impacted me more to understand, like, wow, like that for me, like, God has a thread in my life generationally, and it's not just because of my mom, it's before that. It even started way before that. And I think that's something that for me has been very important to understand and even look back how generationally faith has really just shaped everything we've done. And, one day I hope to sort of share my parents' journey to the United States, because even that, as I hear as an adult, and recently my mom told me it again in more detail, and just I was like, oh, by the grace of God, like, y'all came here and made it, because that's what I believe in. But I think as I grew up, and like I said, I was fortunate to have friends that reinforced faith in my life on a weekly basis. I was actually part of our praise and worship team, so I sang.
Of course you were. Of course. That was
I
like your choir. That was like your choir.
and
Oh
it was like my choir. And, you know, I was part of that for a very, I mean, that was probably like 10 years of my life. You know, mostly like teenage and almost to, you know, adulthood that happened. And, you know, and had that reinforcement, and, you know, and you go through your struggles and, you know, your challenges and things like that. But I think, if I think within the last maybe 5-7 years, my faith has really kind of focused more on who Jesus was at the time, and what he stood for, and what it really means to love like Jesus. You know, I think that's been, and I've delved in more into social justice, you know, work as a Christian, and what does that mean? What does that look like? What it doesn't mean as well. So I think I've taken more of that lens of, you know, what did Jesus live, and you know, what did it mean to him, you know, because, you know, a lot of people I've grown up saying like, oh, he was a radical and all these things, and I understood it from to a certain extent, I would say, growing up. But I think now as an adult, I understand it more, you know, because it is sort of, you know, unheard of to say, you know, you have to love others just like you would want, like you love yourself, you know. And there's that whole thing, if you don't love yourself, then you can't love others, you know. And that's true. Like you see it, I mean, you're seeing it play out right now. I truly believe that the sort of the hate and all that is because people have issues within themselves that, you know, that they haven't dealt with and they're not facing, and definitely they can't love their other, whoever that is, their neighbor, their friends, or because there's things that they haven't dealt with, you know. And then it plays into, you know, white supremacy and all these things that kind of have delved into it, and I definitely believe that. So I think for me, it's definitely been more of that journey of what does a Christian within a world of social justice mean, and what does it look like, and what do you know, what do you fight for, and what do you stand for, and how do you make that happen, you know, and how do you stay true to what the word says, and what it is, without getting into that far sort of left radicalism that can be, and, you know, and then also, like, you're not using the Bible to sort of back up what you're trying to say. Instead, you're living it out versus using it, because anybody can use the Bible to justify whatever they want to justify. You know, we've seen it happen. History repeats itself at all times with that. But how do you use it in a way that it's definitely sort of saying like, hey, you know, at the end of the day, Jesus loves you just the way you are. I'm not here to judge you. I can't say, you know, what your relationship is with him or it isn't. You know, I can say what my relationship is and what I believe and how that, and, you know, whether we agree on it or not, like, I'm not going to hate you, right? You know, like there's that whole, you know, notion, you know, the whole other conversation that we had of the thing of, like, you know, they say, you know, God hates the sin, not the sinner. So there's a whole, you know, other thing that we can go into, probably its own segment, and things like that, you know. But I definitely see myself more in that realm of how do I navigate it in a world where racial justice, equity is important, and how does that, you know, how does that sort of fit into my faith, or how does it all fit in together? Because I definitely believe that, you know, Jesus came for everybody. You know, he didn't come for the elite of the elite. He came, you know, to be a savior for all, you know, and that's sort of my thought process. And I know early in the video I said, you know, Transformation Nation. It took me a while to find, after our church sort of had to close its doors. Probably I think it was like in my mid-20s when that happened, or like maybe 24 or something like that when that happened. I went to another church, you know, and it was It was good, but it was a predominantly white church, and it was a very different experience for me. But then, you know, the last election happened, and people started saying some things, and I know everybody says you don't go to church for the people, but it's just like there
It
comes a point where,
though it hasn't yet.
but I was like, well, there comes a point where, you know, if people are agreeing with, you know, someone calling Mexicans rapists and all these other things, then I can't, like, I won't expose myself to that either. So I went through a journey of trying to find a church, and I remember I'm like, oh Lord, you gotta help me, because I don't know what is out there. And that was at the time where I started really looking into the whole social justice and what does that mean, and trying to figure out what kind of church God wanted me in, and where was he opening the doors. And probably I would say I found a few, like there's a few pastors out there, like there's Judah Smith, who's really good, and he's out in Seattle. I'm not gonna move to Seattle to go to church. You know, and there's others as well. Like there's but I think within the last, I think it was like 2 years ago, I started getting some other like churches, like there's a church out in Florida and things. And then last year I stumbled upon a church called Transformation Church, and their pastors, Michael Todd, and I got into a sermon that he was doing around it's called Marked, and I got into that, and it was just so different from any other sort of church. And there was this whole Transformation Nation kind of thing happening, where people from all over the world are tuning in to watch this pastor. And there was a conference that they held that I surprisingly ended up going to by myself. So
you told me about this.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
So it was one of those things where it was just like not normal for Lisette to do. Introverted Lisette to do.
Yeah.
Go out. But it was probably one of the best decisions that I have ever made, because it brought me into a community of people who truly believe, you know, in loving others, helping others, making a difference, making a mark in this world through Jesus. And that whole experience, you know, it was last year in September, has carried on even up to now, and just seeing that and continues to just shape what I find important and what's priority, and how I lead my life, both personally and professionally. I definitely see a change in my professional sort of sense, and where I want to go, and where I see myself and what's important, and definitely delving into more of that racial equity, but through a lens of faith, like through the lens, you know, of Jesus for me. Like that's who I am. And it comes with its own struggles and its own sort of issues, because not everybody understands what you mean and what you're trying to say. Or if I say like, well, I grew up in evangelical church, that also has its own connotations, because everybody sort of thinks of that white evangelical voter who has been driving a lot of things lately in the country and in recent history. So I definitely think, I think that's sort of where faith has intersected for me as an adult, and like to understand where it kind of started, and how special and important it has been for my life and my parents' life, and just the different things that I've kind of seen manifested through my family has just been amazing. Like if you talk about miracles and things like that, like that's just things that are normal to me, and things that are supernatural like that. I truly believe that. Like I think, you know, I'm definitely not afraid to say things like that, because I've definitely seen what, you know, believing in Jesus really means to me, and how things can change so dramatically for the good in people's lives when, you know, he comes into play, and the prayers and everything. But yeah, I think that's sort of a little bit. I hope I kind of capture what you wanted to touch on.
Definitely. I got a new name for you. Social justice champion Christian Lisette. That's like, I gotta come up with a better maybe acronym. We gotta move.
Listen, we
gotta come up with some better things. So I'm just like, yeah, I think that's awesome though, because I feel like I have not heard Christianity or people talk about the church in a way like from a social, like a social justice racism lens. Like that's the way you're looking at it, and I think that's obviously a wonderful way to look at it, because we have so much of this hate in the world, and people not loving themselves or understanding themselves, and they are projecting it out onto the world. And so I think it's amazing, and thank you for sharing that and hearing your journey of where you started from when you were young to where you are now. And really, I've been friends with you for a little while now, and watch you, I've seen you evolve in a sense. So when you talk about your professional purpose, and also what you were telling me earlier, a lot of this, it's kind of like the evolution, and I think it's amazing. So thank you for sharing that, and
thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. We'll be back.